Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohel Hasni. I've been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast. Good evening.
Good evening.
I have heard so much about you and seen your name in different places as the chairman of the National Renewable Energy Board, but never had the opportunity to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you for the interest in engaging in this conversation about renewable energy in the Philippines. Yes, as I think, as I have mentioned, my term at NREB had ended by end of March. So I'm fresh out of NREB, if we may call it that. But of course, happy to talk about renewable energy, as this is also a personal advocacy of mine, not just not just a professional endeavor.
And thank you. Yes, I think Philippines has many reasons why it should be
Yes.
big on renewable energy and energy special efficiency, especially because of such a high tariff. No.
Definitely. And we have had a long history with renewables. As I was saying, Philippines has had a long history with renewables. I always open on this note whenever I am given the opportunity to talk about renewables in the Philippines. When the National Power Corporation was formed in the Philippines to develop the electrical system in the country, their main mandate was to develop the hydropower resources. And it made perfect sense for us, an archipelago, to tap the resource that's surrounding us. So that mandate of NPC was stood there for quite some time. It was expanded in the 1970s to cover also geothermal resources in the country. Again, made perfect sense, because we have a lot of the resource in the country. We live in this belt where, together with other countries, we have that abundance of resource. So for several decades, it was really renewables, mainly hydro and geothermal, that was powering the economy in the Philippines. It was only in the 80s, late 80s, when we first tapped into petroleum resources, oil, and then eventually coal resources. But almost all of it is imported. To this date, almost all of it is imported. It was only when Malampaya resource was found and then started operating in early 2000, late 1990s and early 2000, that we had our own petroleum resource as contributing to the power mix in the Philippines. But for quite some time, it was really renewables, and that's I think that's the beauty of the story that we sometimes overlook, because now we have, admittedly, majority of the or bulk of the resource in the Philippines fueling the generation is really the fossil fuel based power. But that has not been the case for quite some time in the Philippines.
Yeah, but at the same time, one could argue that you have the best Renewable Energy Act. I think all the incentives are there. I've never seen anything that has so much provision. And one could argue we have seen a lot of wind power, some solar, but rooftop solar has not happened.
I know.
Despite the very high tariff, it's almost
Yeah.
20 cents a kilowatt hour, no? Even more.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that has been when I started out with NREB in April 2019. I was appointed end of March 2019. The first thing that we did was really to review what has happened to the RE Act. And it was prime for review, I think. the law and its implementation was prime for review at that time, because that was, 10 years after the act was passed, December 2008 when the law was passed. So 10 years, 2018, 2019, it was really ripe for review. And the main question was, so how are we doing? How are we be doing in terms of the goal of the act, which was to accelerate, increase the utilization of RE? Where are we now? And I don't know if it was still a shock to all of us, but from an RE and share in generation of 34% in 2008, 2019, when we started the review, it was down to 20%. So instead of increasing the share of RE, the it was quite intriguing that 10 years after the law was passed, the share of RE has actually gone down. And there were a lot of factors that in our review we have identified. There were what we call cross-cutting issues, meaning it doesn't discriminate the type of resource. It affected all the resources in an adverse way, and that would partly explain the decline of the share of RE. And the first one there is really the delay in the implementation of the program. The law was passed in 2008. The first feed-in tariff project came in 2014 already at that time. So there was really a significant delay, and even the progress of implementation was sort of uh, hesitant, if I may put it that way. There were a lot of concerns about the program even after the law was passed. So, and to demonstrate the intensity of delay, if I can put it that way, we are just on the first year of implementation of the Renewable Portfolio Standard, the RPS program, which was on the act. 2020 is the first year of implementation. 2021, we are on the first compliance year, where this is when the reckoning of the recs of the RE certificates are counted. So imagine that, more than 10 years after the law was passed, and we're just starting out with one of the cornerstone programs in the law. So that delay, I think, really took its toll on the success of the law's implementation. So that's one. And there are resource specific issues as well, and we have identified them. We've proposed recommendations to the DOE on how to address those issues. Some are easy to solve, others are admittedly will take, not just the DOE but all other agencies to come together to find the solution on. But yeah, it's quite saddening, I think, that the law, with all its lofty objectives, had this to show 10 years after.
I was not aware of that. So because I was
Yeah.
wondering what happened to RPS and REC. So,
Hmm.
and who are trading? So can you
Mhm.
explain a bit more on the RPS, how it is
Sure.
being implemented in the RECs?
Yep. Okay. So the RPS, there are two forms or two programs under the law. In the grid connected areas, the RPS is based on a percentage that must be procured by the utilities, by what's called the mandated participants. They have to procure a certain percentage of their gross sales, reckoned at the end of the year, from renewable energy sources. Currently, that percentage is set at 1%, which is the minimum that the law required. So 1% of their sales need to be obtained from RE resources. In order to demonstrate their compliance, they need to show RE certificates. They need to bank RE certificates in an RE registrar. So the RE registrar records their certificates. Each certificate is equivalent to 1 megawatt hour. So they have to in a way, this registrar is also the market operator, by the way. So they know, they have a way of finding out how much of the home, if they are complying, if the utilities or the mandated participants are complying with their 1%. And if there are utilities that have more than their 1% requirement, they can actually trade it in the
Trade that.
RE market. Yep. And those that need to fill in or fill up their share, then they can purchase the certificates in that market. The market is scheduled for commercial operation by June of this year, in time for the end of December reckoning of the first year of compliance of certificates.
So your baseline is 20%. So the existing renewable energies cannot be counted into this RPS, right?
The baseline is actually not the 20%. It's a 2019 sales that's used by the DOE as the baseline. But you're correct that plants that were RE plants that were online before the RE Act was passed was not counted, or would not count for RPS compliance.
But you took 10 years to implement. So
I know.
which date to count?
It's still the 2008, unfortunately. That's still the date that counts for reckoning the what we call RPS eligible plants.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing I always intrigued me, I think I have the answer somehow, but I think I'll still ask you, is why in the Philippines the rooftop solar was never included into the feed-in tariff? Only above 400 kilowatt, I believe, right?
Yes, good question. I think there was no express prohibition for rooftop solar. So theoretically, rooftop solar could qualify, except that the way the rules were formulated, the RE developer was required to show what we call, I forgot now the exact term, but some sort of rights over the land that over which they will put up the project. So if it's rooftop solar, what kind of rights can you demonstrate to fill that qualification with the DOE, to in simplistic terms, so that the DOE evaluator can tick the box when you submit your requirements? So it wasn't quite clear, because, but I guess I should also mention that there are some developers that's quite creative also. So they obtained leasehold rights over rooftop solar. And as far as I know, leasehold rights were accepted by the DOE. So there are some that were able to qualify, but admittedly, one, it's harder to convince DOE because it doesn't quite fit the box. Second challenge there is with respect to lenders. What will the lenders now use as part of the security package if it's not land? And lenders, particularly in the Philippines, are used to seeing, titles over lands, and then they annotate their rights at the back of the title. Not quite the way, not quite something you can do if you have only a leasehold right over rooftop of certain facilities. So that's I guess one explanation. I'm sure there are others. There are technical explanation for it, but because I'm a lawyer by training, at least that part I can appreciate and I can also explain.
Yeah, because when we put a rooftop solar in ADB headquarters, I forgot, many years ago, just after the RE law maybe. So we have more than 600 kilowatt. We never went and applied for anything because we were told you cannot be part of. Of course, we consume more than that.
Okay. Then that qualifies as own use, I think. That's why you did not need to apply.
But our weekend surplus, but now during COVID, I think it's all surplus.
That's right. You're right.
Weekend surplus.
Yep.
Because,
So,
yeah.
should be under net metering. If you know, if you're looking for a program where the facility, a basket where the facility falls in terms of the RE programs, it should be under net
Yeah,
metering.
net metering came very recently. I mean, relatively speaking, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
it's still, I see the explanation that you gave, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still Philippines with 22 cents a kilowatt hour electricity tariff, maybe now even more as peso has appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there should be a lot more rooftop solar,
Yes,
especially
I
Metro
agree.
Manila.
I agree. And I think this, as the cost of the technology has come down, the DOE is also looking at revisiting that policy, because I think now they see that that it makes a lot of sense now, compared to maybe what 10 years ago, when the law was passed. It makes more economic sense now for consumers to really put up their own facilities, and for government, for regulators to just, allow for these commercial transactions to happen. I think there is, in a way, there's light at the end of the tunnel, in that regard.
Yeah, I hope that happens soon because I'm in Rockwell. I look over some
Ah.
part of Makati, and I was looking a whole market. They are changing the roof. So I was just
Oh,
calculating
interesting.
this roof
Yep.
can do not quite 1 megawatt, but definitely 600-700 kilowatt.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That can light up the entire neighborhood there, but they're just renovating with a standard tin roof or tiles partially. So
Yep.
obviously, if they were able to get feed-in tariff
Mm-hmm.
or even sell it to the neighbors, the cost
Yes.
of production will not be more than 6-7 cents on that roof.
Correct. Correct. I think, and the potential for these types of arrangements in eco zones, for example, is
Mhm.
something that's totally untapped. There is a lot of potential in eco zones. They have locators have different, I'm sure, demand patterns as well. So they could, if there is, of course, if once batteries become more cost competitive, imagine the arrangements that locators, the manufacturing sector, can come up with the right technology, and with with a mindset on the part of government and the regulators to just unlock markets for consumers and for players.
So coming to batteries, like in Australia is doing, I'm sure you are up to date on what's happening. One,
Mm-hmm.
the feed-in tariff, what they have done, you have a daytime feed-in tariff and an evening feed-in tariff.
Mm-hmm.
So then basically someone is encouraged, rather than selling that unit of electricity, storing it and selling it back during evening
Yes.
time. So
Yep.
by default, giving an incentive to install batteries at home.
Mm-hmm.
See any of that coming into the Philippines soon?
Not yet. To be very honest about it, to be very direct about it, I think the Secretary of Energy, and I think to a great extent the Energy Regulatory Commission, are seeing the same are seeing eye to eye on this point, on not extending or not broadening the scope of the feed-in tariff program in the Philippines. Right now, the only remaining capacity qualified for feed-in tariff is for run-of-river hydro. There's about 100 megawatts of capacity left for run-of-river hydro to qualify for the FIT program. But other than that, the program is closed for solar, for wind, and for biomass. There's no longer any remaining capacity for subscription there, and I don't think the DOE will still revisit that position. Maybe uh, as you know, we're changing. We're up for elections, national elections next year. Maybe there will be a change of thinking, a change of mindset in the next administration. But currently, so that's good until June of next year. We don't see a new set or a new round of feed-in tariff in the Philippines, whether it's for batteries or for the existing technologies.
Yeah, I mean, existing technologies feed-in tariff really did not make sense because Philippine tariff was already so high, right?
Yes, yeah.
Already your feed-in tariff is 22 cents a kilowatt hour equivalent if somebody can generate
Yep.
on premises. And plus the way the feed-in tariff or even net metering is structured,
Mhm.
so it's not a gross, right? It's a net.
Yes,
So
correct.
Meralco takes off transmission distribution, which is quite an exception relative to anywhere in the world. I think only Florida or someone had it. So
Yeah, there was effort on the part of the DOE 2 years ago to review the structure for the net metering program. There were advisors that were there were consultants and a study commissioned from, I think, from Hawaii, if I remember correctly, to look at variations of the rate structure. But the rate structure is something within the jurisdiction of the regulator, of the Energy Regulatory Commission. So while the DOE had all these studies, the DOE on its own could not change the mandate on the structure. So the ERC was the one that the ERC also looked into it, but and I think on this point, it's correct that it's not just a matter of changing the rate structure for net metering. You'll have to address what happens to the rest of the market, what happens to the rest of the customers of that utility, where if the objective is really reached, then you have more and more people opting out in a way of the utilities captive market. And what happens then to the captive market for the rate that the utility is supposed to recover from. So it takes it takes a bigger exercise, I suppose, than just reviewing the net metering rate. And to that, I think it's absolutely correct. But I think that that takes us to the bigger question that we really have to confront in the Philippines, if you ask me. We have currently a distribution sector and even a transmission sector that was with a framework, governed by a framework that it has not yet taken into consideration all these technological developments that have come up over the last 10, 15 years. And there is really a misfit, if I can put it that way, between that regulatory framework and what people can do now, and the technology is available that can really reduce the rates or the burden of the consumers in terms of power prices in the Philippines. And I think we need to confront those hard questions and ask those difficult questions, and do the hard work in terms of reviewing the regulatory framework.
absolutely, because I interviewed one of my classmate friend, Rajat Sarawat. He is chief executive of one of the regulatory institute in Australia, now in Western Australia, also in a regulatory body. And he was saying the regulatory thinking that is changing right now, like what used to be ancillary services, they rename it as essential services, because that is
Oh,
no longer
wow.
ancillary,
Good.
right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that is very essential to run the grid.
Correct.
And especially in terms of asset, stranded asset, revaluation of those assets, because those things are changing exactly as you said. Old days, a distribution company had an obligation to supply. Does it mean the consumer had a right to disconnect? No one knows. I mean, you're a lawyer, but issue is that a lot of consumer might just disconnect. Then what happens to those specific assets that were installed
invested.
just to
Yeah.
serve that customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
who takes those risks? So
Correct.
a lot of
Correct.
those questions, which was not a relevant question before, but now more
Mm-hmm.
and more it will be.
Mm-hmm. And I think for a long time, and maybe till today, those questions were avoided, or deferred. You know, okay, I know that's the right question, but maybe this is not the right time to ask those questions. Come back in 5 years or something. But I think that future where we have delayed all these questions to answer all these questions, that future is upon us now. We need to ask those questions today, and it's not just about the investments of the utilities and the investments that they continue to pour into their systems. It's also the contracts, the long-term contracts that they are entering
Mhm.
into. What do we do with all these contracts? There are, for example, coal supply agreements that were entered into maybe 2 years ago, and these are 20, 25 year contracts. We need to, I think, for policymakers, we need to send the right signals so that, people will not enter into long-term contracts like that if the direction is not the direction as a nation is no longer going that way. The right signals need to be sent. And I think uh, I think the fear, the hesitation of confronting those difficult questions, we need to really just, buckle up and and find the answers. I don't think the answer will come from just one person or one agency. To be honest, I don't think this is the work of the DOE alone or the ERC alone. I think it requires a larger perspective to find the right answers for these questions.
Yeah, because what also intrigues me that globally you keep on hearing all those huge solar auction prices,
Hmm.
almost nearing 1 cent now, right?
Yes.
Portugal and then
Yeah.
recently Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
And people say, oh, they have a subsidized this, subsidized that. But again, issue is none of the Philippine utilities, including all the electric cooperatives, gone and say, okay, let's test the market rather than using our diesel.
Hmm.
Will there be someone who can install solar and maybe can supply us 3 cents a kilowatt hour? So I
Hmm.
often question, why is no one doing that? There must be
Hmm.
some reason. Is it regulatory comfort or what?
Mm,
You
good
know what I
question.
mean, right?
I can just yes, yes. I can just hazard a guess. Well, two things. One, in terms of the official answer, I think that the DOE's program on the green energy auction is meant to address that. It's meant to unearth those competitive prices, because the DOE is also saying, okay, I see solar at this beautiful prices all over the world coming up at auctions. Do we get those same prices in the Philippines if we engage in the same exercise? I think the program on the green energy auction is meant to
Okay,
address
there is a
that.
program. Okay, good.
Yes, yes. The second thing, on your question, why are the utilities, including electric cooperatives, why are they not going into going getting attracted by these bright lights of low prices of solar, in particular in auctions? I think because a lot of our utilities still have contracts, long-term contracts, and they're not most of their requirements are covered by these long-term contracts, with either oil companies, or not just oil companies, but coal power projects, but also RE projects, the pre-RE Act projects that have entered into long-term contracts. I think they're still, much of them are still covered. And also because in the Philippines, and this is where that discussion on regulation really is something we cannot avoid. Most of the cost is really not on generation alone.
Mhm.
Most of the cost is really on delivery of that power. So most of the costs are really on transmission, and in some areas, the cost of constraint in the transmission facilities, and also distribution charges. So when you add on all these costs, at the end of the day, that 1 cent per kilowatt hour is not going to be 1 cent per kilowatt hour to their customers. So, and that's where I admittedly RE is at a disadvantage, because while big coal plants can somehow make up for that by economies of scale, REs are of a smaller size. They really, this is all that they could supply, and it's not going to be 24/7. So those are the things
No,
that
no,
that
that,
can be
that
adjusted.
yeah, that 24/7 argument doesn't hold anymore. If you look at the battery
True. Yes,
prices,
yes,
you can
agree,
get
agree.
a $200
Yep.
a kilowatt hour battery install almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Agree,
think
agree on that one. Agree. Yep.
so, but it's an interesting regulatory challenge also, I guess, for
Yes,
the electric cooperatives, the regulatory dependence, because some of these long-term contract can be bought out depending on how the numbers are, right?
correct. Yeah.
And then eventually consumers becomes more aware of where my electricity coming from. They might also
Yes,
demand on these electric
yes,
companies, right?
yes. That is the part I think that has been untapped. Um, I'm not sure if you're aware, but another program under the RE Act is the creation of voluntary markets, particularly the Green Energy Option Program. That's where consumers or customers can contract directly, buy from RE with a minimum. Currently, the DOE put a threshold for the minimum demand that the customer can contract for. If a customer has a minimum monthly kilowatt hour peak of 100 kilowatt hour peak, they can contract their RE supply directly. And we see in the NREB, when we partnered with European Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines for this initiative, we see a lot of interest from customers contracting directly. But this also means that they will have to opt out of their utility. So it's like the net metering of sorts, but you don't provide your own, but you contract an RE supply from a licensed RE supplier. But there's still a lot of interest because the customers already realize that at the outset, they will realize a discount once they go full RE, because RE is zero VAT. So that's already 12,
Oh, yes, yes.
percent discount from your ordinary from the supply that you get from your utility, to at most 12%, because the utility has a blended system as well, but like 8 to 12% discount. So that's um instantly attractive for the customer. So I think um, that is where we have not really ignited, if I can use that term, the movement, that initiative coming from the customers, to really push their utilities to either secure RE supply, or let us go from your system and we will contract for our own RE supply.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many large customers are aware of that. Thanks for mentioning this. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember the
Yep.
voluntary market. Because my information is not up to date. Because all I
Mhm.
remember, the Renewable Energy Act, when it came through, it had all the possible
Yes.
provisions there, right? It
Yep.
was
Yep.
supposed to really jumpstart everything.
Yeah. But even the GEOP, that Green Energy Option Program, the voluntary market, that was just launched last year. So 10 years after the law was passed, and now this initiative is being launched. But I think it's also okay. I think its time has come, because as you know, 2019 2020 is quite a turning point for renewables. And I think the mindset is already there. The environment is ready to take on RE directly. And as you mentioned, I think how many large customers are aware that the option is even out there. This is where the public information drive really comes in, and the partnership, the collaboration with trade organizations, trade associations, I think will be critical. And the DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry, has been very supportive on this issue. The DTI is a member of NREB, of the National Renewable Energy Board, and when we launched GEOP, I really made sure that our DTI director at the board would be very involved, and I think I was just really fortunate that she was also of the same mind, that the potential that this has for our MSMEs, the potential savings for MSMEs, especially as part of the recovery program, um, is something that she also understood. So the DTI is including in their, they have national road shows for MSMEs. They have allotted 10 to 15 minutes of every road show to explain the program to MSMEs. So I think that's a huge support, because it did not take the DOE to do that. It takes another agency of the government to really take this initiative to their own stakeholders.
Fantastic. You must have worked closely with Kate Maceda, no? Because she
At
was
the
it was
ERC.
now ERC, but at that time I think she was in the front line also renewable energy law.
Yeah, during the drafting of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
law. Yeah, yeah, she was very active. But I only know her now that she's at
Uh,
the
we worked together
ERC.
in Philippine energy efficiency projects. I should get
Okay.
her
Yes,
thinking
yes.
on these things as well. So Kate,
Yep, yep.
she's very, very passionate with renewable energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you just left the renewable energy board, right?
Yes,
So
yes. So
what's
two
your plan
years,
now?
2 years at the NREB. No, I resumed working full time at the law firm PJS Law. I'm a partner in the firm, and I just took a took a leave for the NREB, to take care of NREB. NREB was supposed to be a part time position, but what I realized is that to really do all the things that we wanted to do at NREB, I really had to devote my full time at it, particularly because I set it as a personal goal that we would update the 20-year National Renewable Energy Plan of the Philippines. And at least we're able to do that. It's now just up for signing by the Secretary of Energy, um, to finalize and to issue the plan. So I think it was a good run at the NREB.
So what's in this? This is a forward-looking 20
Yes,
years plan.
yes,
Wow,
definitely.
wow. So
Yep.
do you mind sharing how
Sure,
you see
sure.
the world
Because
changing?
we conducted the public consultation already with the highlights of the plan. In the plan, we, of course, it included analysis of what has happened over the last 10 years and what we should do differently, to take us to realize, or to shift gears, so to speak, on the RE programs. So the first thing that we recommended or the major thing that we recommended in the plan is that, the RPS 1% minimum, will not take us to the goals that we have set
Mhm.
for the RE agenda in the Philippines. In 2010, when the first NREP was formulated, was established, the goal was set to have a 35% RE share in the generation mix by 2030. So even if we just keep to that goal, which, by the way, just takes us back to where we were in 2008, if you recall, even if we just keep to that 35% goal, the 1% will not get us there. What we have, so we did our runs, we did our simulations, we used our capacity planning software in doing our modeling at the NREB. What we have calculated is that we need to increase that share of 1% to 2.52% by 2023. That will take us, keeping that at 2.52% all the way to 2030 or 2040. 2030 will reach that 35% mark. And by 2040, we will have 55% of the generation share coming from RE if we keep it at 2.52 for the 20 year less than 20 year period. So that's the main recommendation that we made in the NREP, and we said that we requested DOE to make that pronouncement sooner so that the projects can line up for to get us to meet those RPS volumes by 2023. So, and DOE has actually been very receptive to our recommendation. In fact, when they did their own runs, they also realized that the 1% will not get us nearly close to the 35%, the 35% mark. In fact, um, without the coal moratorium that the DOE issued, um, we saw that the numbers are actually going to continue with its decline, and we get to about 15-17% RE only by 2030, and we're already at 20% coming from 34% of 2008. So it will just continue with that decline. So they agree. I mean, it's I think it's inevitable that we realize we will not get to the 35% with just 1%. But even in their own calculations, the DOE the DOE's numbers actually landed at 2.92% to
Yeah.
get us to. So it's actually higher. But of course, we don't want to shock the utilities, I suppose, because they are the ones who will be required to comply with this mandate. So I think DOE will keep to our recommendation of 2.52 and really prepare for this program that will support the procurement of RE so that the mandated participants are not left to their own devices in finding a way to comply with their RPS requirements.
So that's one of the main change
Mhm.
uh, uh, in the revision or the update for the next
Yes.
20.
Yes. The other main thing are really the regulatory, what we call the transition enablers. And these are the changes that we need to make on the regulatory side, on the distribution, allowing or on the distribution side, or actually on the grid side generally, allowing for allowing for DERs, distributed energy resources or distributed energy systems in the Philippines. They're currently still not permitted. But the technology is also there. So what we don't want to happen is that distributed systems, because they make economic sense, will just be adopted by consumers, and they will not just register with the DOE or with the regulator because it makes sense. It makes economic sense, but the rules do not allow for it. So systems like this and consumers or people will just go rogue. They'll just opt out of the system on their own, and there'll be no way to manage the changes that will happen if things unravel that way. So what we recommended in the NREP are certain changes in the regulatory framework for the DU, for the distribution utilities, and for the grid, as well as uh, talking about or confronting those difficult questions. What do we do with the stranded contracts? What do we do with the stranded assets? And we recognize that, and I love what the World Energy Council president, whenever she talks about the energy transition, I love what she says, that it's not a template that you can just uh, uh, pick from the pick from the closet or something and then fit right in and then implement here, because we need to define our own transition plan in the Philippines. We're just talking about the grid. What do we do with the off-grid areas? And to me, that's the more difficult question. The off-grid areas are in different stages of development. So we cannot impose, for example, there's RPS also off grid, but the rules now currently contemplate as if you can just use a single number similar to the grid areas, a single number to use and make sure that the off-grid areas will comply. That won't work because the different off-grid areas have different types of resources. There is no singular market where they can procure RE, and they have different stages of economic development. So I think we need to be as bespoke as we can get to the off-grid areas. Maybe cluster them, and this is the recommendation we made for the off-grid areas. Cluster the off-grid areas, and then identify the optimal mix of RE in those clusters. Cluster them either according to the resources available or according to the economic development in the area and the economic plans for those areas, because we it's more complex dealing with the off-grid areas, especially because in the Philippines the off-grid areas are also subsidized by the on-grid consumers. So it's all the all the complication you can think of are in the off-grid areas.
But at the same time, for less than $500, somebody can set up a 1 kilowatt hour of battery and a 1 kilowatt hour equivalent solar panel, say 300 kilowatt hour panel, 300-watt panel for 3 hours a day. That system will cost less than $500 today. And
Yes.
people's consumption are so little, so they might just opt out completely, no?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
And
That's why
no regulation can stop that from happening.
exactly, because that's what I'm saying. If it makes sense for people, they will not. Even if even if we put the most onerous penalties in the regulation, if it makes sense for people to do it that way, and it provides for electricity for their household, for their school, for the hospitals in the area, it's going to be very tough, even politically, to enforce all those penalties, because the technology provides the end users with their immediate needs, and it addresses very urgent and critical requirements for all these unelectrified, what we call unelectrified areas. So
Even for electrified areas, right?
that's
Because it
true.
gives
Yes.
the super
Yes.
reliable supply. We did a pilot, what I call electricity in a box, in
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan, Kyrgyz Republic, and Tajikistan about 3 years ago. So this system cost about $1,000 or
Uh-huh.
just a bit less. So it had a solar panel, the battery, and a small DC fridge, one DC 20-inch, 32-inch television, half a
Mm-hmm.
dozen light bulb, lot of USB connection, and of course you can add a radio and a computer. It has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, and the whole thing costs $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
The 5-year warranty, and if you have that, I think that technically can serve most of the household in the Philippines. Sorry, it also has a couple of fans. So
Ah.
if you spend $1,000, then you have no outlay,
Yep.
you have no utility chasing you,
Yes.
and no one can stop that from happening, no?
Yes. Yes.
So
It will
that's
be like, it will be the RE version of community pantries. If you're familiar with what's happening in the Philippines right now, the community pantries sprouting all over, and people just giving what they can, and people taking what they need. It will be, yeah, yeah. It will be the energy industry's version of a
yeah.
community pantry for all
And
these areas.
in
Yeah.
that case, the pantry could be an electric car, which has a say 50 kilowatt hour battery that can run around and distribute, right?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you very much for your time. I learned a lot of things. Is there something else that I could have asked you, or
No, I think we're good. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share all these things with you and your listeners. There's so much to do still in the RE sector, and I remain optimistic. I know there are a lot of hurdles that we have in the regulatory side, in the government permitting side even. but I think there's really room to be optimistic and more ambitious, to be honest, in our RE targets in the Philippines.
Absolutely, because especially because it's an island economy, right?
Yes. Yep. Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
you.
Kevin.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.